Hey folks, on the table today I have another portable, this being my Decca 50. These machines were a product of the 1930s and were produced in one form or another into the 50s. As you see, this has got a brown leatherette case with a cream coloured motor board, and it presents very well. It's an honest machine that I have very much restored to the way it's supposed to be. Overall, I'm quite satisfied with the restoration of this machine. Quite a few things I had to do to it. That being, this leatherette is very, very dirty. Years and years of caked on dust, grime and detritus. And to clean it, what I had done was I got some washing powder and some water, and I cleaned each panel very much the same way you'd scrub the floor. And then afterwards I'd wiped it dry and cleaned up any white spots and patches. Then applied a leather guard, type of leather oil that also works okay on this type of material. This machine, however, has one major defect, and that is a auto brake that will not comply. This sound box, when I had first got this machine, was in a very, very sorry state. I ended up having to make my own diaphragm out of several layers of paper. And when this machine had its paper diaphragm installed, I also had to cut 2 size rubber gasket tubing. And when I'd cut it 2 size, getting it to fit was not easy. There is indeed signs of age on this machine, such as the occasional rubbing budge on this corner, the smudging and budging, a missing closing clip, a little bit of rust on the motor plate turntable, a few loose screws here and there because the threads which the seats into is all wood. They're a bit loose, but overall it is a very solid machine. And to find out how this machine was causing problems back in the day was, one of the problems was this inherent rattling, whereas the horn snakes around from the neck around like so, and it only goes to this portion, a tiny little spot. The rest of it's all a case and a motor. Here, in this spot, is steel on steel contact, and as we know, that would cause rattling. When steel on steel meet and vibrate, it will create a buzzing sound, especially on louder records. And in doing so, I took a few shavings of an eraser and put the rubber on the contact points of where the steel meets, and then I screwed it back down, and still some 6 years later it is still going quite okay. And on the turntable we have a Summit record. Now Summit were an Australian label for a few years during the 30s. They would often use masters from the United States and the United Kingdom. These machines also were copied by a few manufacturers. I have a green case version of another machine made by a different brand. But Decca in the 1930s transitioned away from Swiss components to an English setup, which largely depended on the motor manufacturer Gerard. Now, Gerard wind-up motors, if they're a single spring, they're quite good. They're very quiet, they have their own quirks and ways which are very different to an American Victor, his master's voice, or even a Columbia machine, and European ones. The motor is very quiet, and I had to do a few things to get it up to this spec. That being, I had to basically break open the spring cap, because inside of these motors, unlike a lot of other manufacturers which might have had a retaining clip or screws, this one had a pressure cap which was stuck on so tight that I had to pry. And on the inside was indeed the spring and dirty grease. These machines also have a very different governor system to what you typically see on other manufacturers. After all, this was a fairly normal machine at the time, which was very much treated in the same way as today we'd think of a television or a heater. Pretty normal, nothing too spectacular. But what is spectacular is that when they made these, they did not think that decades in the future people would still be using them and enjoying them, and let alone working. But of course, like all machines, some things are not always perfect. But what is very handy about this portable is it does also have a needle pot that does close, so you can just put your needles inside. The speed arm, speed readout, is very easy because it has 78 squarely in the middle. It's also fast, which I have tested how fast it will spool up to. It'll run into the about 100 or so revolutions per minute, and when you go to slow, it can even stop with this type of design. And when you bring it up to 78 from that speed, this little pad moves away from a tiny flywheel that moves, and these governor bowls expand like so. But let us not talk anymore and let the machine show you how good it sounds.